Yeah, bring on that heat, baby. What's up? Today we're going to be talking about song mapping. Mapping out a song. I'm getting ready to sit down here and learn some new music that I'm going to be a part of recording in the very near future. And I want to talk about my process a little bit because it's very important. I had a student yesterday uh, tell me that she wants to learn how to learn songs, right? So I would rather teach a student how to learn songs on their own than to teach a student a song. I have no problems teaching students songs, but I'd much rather help them figure out and learn and give them the tools that they need to learn their songs whenever they need to, which is one of the things that's very important. My students play in a lot of different bands, whether in the school bands or their own projects. And, I don't want them to be uh, limited to what they can do until they get to their drum lesson in a week to help them with a song. So, we were talking about a lot of things yesterday that will help her work towards being able to really figure songs out. And one of the first thing is when we start listening to songs, I ask them what they're hearing, and I try to figure out what's the first thing that strikes them from the song, and then we talk about what we are listening for. First of all, I like to listen for timing, whether it's the hi-hat or the ride cymbal. What's the tempo of the song? What's the timing? And from there we can move on to figuring out where the snare drum is, because for the most part the snare drum is going to be on 2 and 4. If it's any more than that or any different than that, that'll come right up, but usually it's going to be on 2 and 4. And then what's going to be a little more complex might be the bass drum pattern, so we'll then move on to the bass drum pattern. Once we have those things in place in a basic kind of way, because a little bit later on we'll start to listen for the ghost notes, the accents, the extra stuff that we don't really focus on in the beginning. We're trying to get the framework right in the beginning. The first thing we're looking for is the framework and the basics. Because what I tell my students is when you get to band practice, if like your job, first time you're working on a song, if you can get from point A to point B, beginning to end, um, and provide a solid foundation, a solid beat, and a solid framework for the rest of the band to work with, then that's great, right? That's the first goal. If we're getting started and we get further than that, that's great. But number one, let's concentrate on just being able to get through the song, point A to point B, in a solid fashion. Once we get the bass, the drums, the snare drum, the ride, the snare drum, the bass drum together, we can then start working on details. Oftentimes, you may have trouble hearing the drums in the song, and certainly when you're playing along, those drums are going to disappear if you're playing on time with the song. So the other thing I like to kind of show my students is that we can get clues to the rhythm of a song. We can get clues to what's going on in the song from the other instruments, and sometimes even the vocal melodies. The vocal rhythms can inform us of what's going on in the song. We can take cues. We can use lyrics to place hold, let's say, a fill or something like that that's going on. We can use a certain word in the song. Oh, when the singer says this word, that's when the fill starts, or that's when the change is going to happen. Or even down to where the one is. Where's the bass drum? A lot of times it's at the beginning of the lyric. When the singer starts to sing, it's usually the beginning of a new measure or the one, right? The first beat of a measure. So there are a lot of different things to listen for. We were working on a song yesterday. We established the tempo and we found the time being kept in the song on the ride. We established that the snare was indeed on 2 and 4. So that's pretty basic stuff that we can groove with. But then the bass drum was kind of hard to hear. So we talked about how the bass drum was basically hitting on all the bass guitar notes. So there was a riff that the bass player was playing, and the bass player was really on every note that the bass player was playing. So a lot of times when you're listening to a song, you can actually find a lot of clues from the bass line, because as we know, the rhythm section of a band is the bass and the drums, the bass guitar and the drums, and they are usually locked together to provide the foundation of the music. So when you are listening to a song, you might have trouble hearing the drums. Listen for the bass line. Try to figure out what the rhythm is going on, and then see if it makes sense for you to match it. It's not always the case, but it's a good rule of thumb to follow. So, and again, even guitars, sometimes in a song, a guitar player will be hitting them chords on eighth notes. So if you can't really figure out what the drums are doing, you can listen to that guitar and follow along and figure out that, oh, the guitar is playing on the eighth notes. That's the speed of my hi-hat. Let's go with that. So active listening is very, very important when you're trying to figure out songs. And it's just basically listening in for the important information that we need, the clues that we need in order to figure out what's going on in the song with the drums. The other part of it is we were also doing last night during one of my bands. We had a very thin crew last night. We only had a few students that were able to make it to rehearsal last night. So we got a lot of good work done on one of the songs. And we spent some time mapping out the song. We listened and we counted along, and we figured out how many times the intro riff happened, how many times the verse happened, how many times the chorus happened, and at what point, any extra. There were a couple of times where there was an extra beat or two of a pause before the next part started. Like, all of those things are important to figure out. And what we do is we sit and we listen and we listen and we write these things down. And because writing helps us to retain. And when you're taking notes in school and you're always like, why do I have to take notes? It helps us to remember. It helps us to kind of solidify these things in our minds. So when we're listening to a song and we're writing out, hey, this is the verse, this is the chorus, it's 4 times, it's 2 times, that's going to help to keep, to solidify it in our minds, so that when we do actually perform the song, we can look on our notes, or maybe after a little while we don't have to, right? But note taking and song mapping are really great tools when you're trying to learn how to play a song. Song mapping is interesting too, because one of the important things about it is that you need to be on the same page with all of your bandmates. So if you decide that a part goes 2 times before it changes, make sure everybody understands that this part is going 2 times. There may be somebody in the band that says, well, to me, that's 1 time. So we have to establish that so that we're all on the same page. It's not about who's right or who's wrong. It's just about all of us agreeing on a format to go ahead and map out this song and write this stuff out. So that all of that stuff is very important. And it really, really helped in the session yesterday. We were able to get that song pretty tight because we spent time on it, because we listened to it, because we counted along, and because we figured out exactly what was going on in the song. There are some songs that are very straightforward, intro, verse, chorus, second chorus, outro, or maybe there's a lead break in there, a guitar solo in there, something like that. And there are other songs that have many, many changes. And the ones that have many, many changes, it is important to sit down and listen and figure out when those changes happen and what goes on. The song that we were doing yesterday with my drum student, cut the tempo in half for one section of the song. We figured out that there were 4 different parts of the song, and the second part that happened in the song, the tempo was cut in half. So that was very important. The snare drum changed slightly. Aside from the 2 and 4, there was the of 2 that was added and the of 4 that was added. A very common thing to hear in rock music, especially these days. A lot of uhs going on the 2 and the 4. For example, right, 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... So counting is super important. Get to know how to count your 16th notes, your 8th notes, and your quarter notes. And I will tell you that that's going to make your life much, much easier when you're trying to figure out what's going on in the song, especially in a simple part where you're adding an extra ghost note or a tap to the snare drum during part of the song. And so if you can count your 16th notes, you could figure out exactly where to drop that ghost note on the snare drum. Same with the bass drum. The bass drum, a lot of times will have a similar pattern on the 3, the of 3, the 1, the of 1. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a... Right, so that's simply adding the onto the 2 and 4 of the snare and adding the onto the 1 and 3 of the bass drum. So get to know those 16th note counts, those 8th note counts, those quarter note counts. Sometimes 30-second notes, depending on the type of music, depending on whether it's a fill or the beat. So you can really start to just get into at least those 3, quarter notes, 8th notes, 16th notes. It's important, folks. Anyway, I think we're good for today, right? Where are we at? Oh, yeah. Yeah, we got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to be working on some stuff for one of my projects. I just had a great weekend in the studio, actually Friday and Saturday. So we'll kind of call it the weekend. Super fun. Lots of great stuff. I got the first preliminary rough mix back today, and it sounds really good. Super happy with it. Oh, I got to change that too. Yeah, super happy with it. So it's a very satisfying feeling when you're able to go into the studio, get some stuff recorded, and hear the end result, and be really happy with the end result. That's the last thing I will leave you with, is that you want to be happy with your performance at all times. Whether it's in the studio, whether it's at a band rehearsal, whether it's at a live show, an audition, wherever you're performing and there are stakes, which means that you want to have a good show, you want to lay down a good recording, you want to get that audition, right? You want to be happy with your performance. How are you guaranteed to be happy with your performance? And listen, I'm the same way. Not all of us can be happy with our performances. There's always something that we're going to pick apart about our performance, and I'm that way too. But that's kind of a drive. That's the thing that kind of pushes us to want to be better the next time, which I think is a good thing. As long as we're not tearing ourselves apart and unrealistically bashing ourselves for bad performance. But the important part is to always be prepared. And I talked about this when I did a video about getting more studio work and being successful in studio sessions. You always want to be prepared. You want to be as prepared as you possibly can be. For me, in my experience, the worst feeling in the world is showing up to a rehearsal, not knowing my parts, and having band members look at me like, don't you know the song? And, this is stuff that's happened to me early on in my career until I got it and started to understand that, listen, I don't ever want to be upset because I'm not prepared. I don't ever want to be nervous before a show, audition, recording session. I don't ever want to be nervous because I'm unprepared, right? So I make sure that I'm as prepared as I possibly can be and go in there confident and looking for good results. So this is what I say: when you want to have the best results possible, make sure you're as prepared as possible, because you don't want to go into these situations unprepared or underprepared. You want to be the person that's nailing their parts no matter what. So that's all I got to say. Have a great one. See you next time.